Agent Romanoff. You miss me?
Oh yeah, Charles, we got ourselves an X-Men fan.
Captain.
Your Highness.
Captain, big fan, Spider-Man. Hey everyone.
Hey guys, and welcome to FilmArtsy, your #1 source for all things films and movies. My name is Elijah, and if you're a fan of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, you've probably wondered at one point or another what it would be like to actually be in one of those movies. And interestingly enough, there's a lot of requirements that go into being a part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, along with a long list of rules and regulations you have to follow as an actor if you were to participate in the larger Marvel Cinematic Universe. So today we thought it'd be really interesting to actually have a discussion and talk about some of these rules that the actors who are in the MCU must follow whenever they're signing on for a role in their contract and they're going to play some iconic character. So that being said, let's go ahead and jump into this and take a look at all of this. Also, quick shout out to Satya for getting our DC Thursday question of the day correctly. If you guys didn't know, every single Thursday we ask a challenging DC related question, and if you answer it correctly over on our YouTube community page, you actually have a chance of having your answer featured here on our channel. If you want to participate, check on our channel every single Thursday for DC Thursday, or Monday if you like Marvel trivia for Marvel Monday, and have a chance to have your own comment featured here. Just make sure you guys are subscribed with notifications on. Okay, let's get back into the video. Now, this information actually comes from a Looper article posted back in 2018 in between Avengers Infinity War and Avengers Endgame. And a lot of the stuff is stuff that's common knowledge. A lot of this stuff comes from things that we've heard the actors kind of specifically talk about when doing press tours. So it is really interesting that a lot of this stuff is very, very restrictive in one way or another, but a lot of it also makes sense as to why there are some rules in place and why there's a need for things like this to occur for some sort of larger universe to happen. Now, one of the biggest rules and the most obvious ones is it is very important for actors in the Marvel Cinematic Universe to, at one way or another, maintain a good public image. Now, this is very clear in kind of a sense. If you look back, there hasn't been very many large controversies involving the Marvel Cinematic Universe actors. Or whenever a controversy does come up, it seems like there's always some sort of resolution that occurs shortly after whenever things start to pop up. We saw recent controversy with Evangeline Lilly, but then all of a sudden we got an apology later. And we've seen stuff like this over the years, but for the most part, the actors really try to stay out of getting involved in controversial topics, though to an extent they also still have freedom. It's more, they're not supposed to be involved in any type of scandal or get arrested or have things like that happen, rather than just a little bit of backlash online. There's obviously still room for them to voice their own opinions on things, so that is kind of a looser topic, but there definitely are some expectations put in by Marvel and Disney to their actors. Now, another responsibility or agreement that a lot of the actors who join the Marvel Cinematic Universe are expected to do have some sort of level of diet and exercise required upon the actor's responsibility in one way or another. Now, a lot of the actors have talked about, the vigorous workout routines that they go into and the types of diets that they're on, but for the most part, it seems like Marvel doesn't necessarily just leave it to the actor's own accord. We've heard Kumail Nanjiani talk about his big transformation for the movie The Eternals, and he's gone on record making it very clear that he only was able to transform his appearance because he had a team of dietitians and workout trainers with him, walking him through every step of the way. However, it does seem very likely for the actors in the Marvel Cinematic Universe that this is something that's kind of expected, but also there are resources provided to all of these actors. And since essentially they are getting paid for these roles, they're getting paid very large sum of money to take on these roles, it's not too crazy to think that this being their job and their day-to-day, them, going through the process of working out and eating according to their diet is kind of lumped in to what they're getting paid to do. And then this one's a little bit more obvious, but obviously when you're playing a character for multiple years, to an extent you feel an attachment to the character that you're playing as, most likely, and there is obviously, with them signing on for more movies, this expectation that while they are kind of this iconic character and they've become the persona that represents a character, they also have to know that at the end of the day, the studio has the final say as to what happens in the storytelling and what happens to the characters. So there is also this general expectation that when you come in to film a movie or read the script for the movie, you're going to participate in whatever is written on the page, because technically you signed on for that contract without actually knowing to the full extent as what is going to happen with a lot of plotline. We know with a lot of the actors in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, because of how tight they keep the scripts on lock, some of the actors don't even know what's happening in the larger story until they show up on set that day. So it is really interesting when we see stuff like that happening, because they're kind of just learning where the story is going as they go along with it. Now, of course, there's probably some flexibility behind some of the actors who have been in the Marvel Cinematic Universe for longer amounts of time, but obviously some of the newer actors, Disney and Marvel, probably have more restrictive contracts over what type of negotiating power they have. But we can kind of expect that if someone like Robert Downey Jr. wanted to continue in the MCU and he voiced his opinion on how he thinks the character needs to stay for a long time, Disney and Marvel would probably try to write something in that favor. But then on the other hand, when we see things like Robert Downey Jr. wanting to leave the MCU and Chris Evans wanting to leave the Marvel Cinematic Universe, they obviously write the story in that regard to paint them out of the story. However, with some of the newer characters, we don't seem to expect it to be like that in as much of a regard. There's obviously going to be room for a lot of actors to negotiate down the road, but it does seem like most of the creative control goes away and it comes up to whenever negotiating power for new movies down the road pop up. And then Spider-Man with Sony is probably a whole different story just because of how involved the existence of Spider-Man, Sony, the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and the greater picture kind of comes together. And on top of all of the kind of interesting restrictions when it comes to storytelling goes, they also have, as many of you probably know, very, very restrictive rules when it comes to the secrecy in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Not only do we know that a lot of the actors don't even know what scenes they're filming until they show up on set that day, but we also know that they have heavy restrictions as to what they're allowed to talk about for the future of the movie, really with an emphasis on avoiding talking about massive spoilers. A lot of the times, most of the actors do a really good job bouncing around the topics, saying things like, I don't know, or I can't say too much about it when they're being interviewed and people are asking about the future. Some actors have a little more trouble than others, but for the most part, they have a very, very tight seal on the Marvel Cinematic Universe and the storytelling that they know of. But it even looks like it goes a step further. We've seen interviews of Elizabeth Olsen going on record talking about how precise and specific the reading sessions are for the scripts, where essentially you have to leave your phone in a lockbox and go inside and read the scripts in one sitting, just because they don't want to just hand out scripts for people to go home with, because things can get leaked and things can get out there. We just recently saw a story happen with Star Wars not too long ago where one of the scripts got out because it was left in a public domain. So stuff like that happens. And interestingly enough, when we see these actors go on these interviews and get questioned about what's happening in the storylines, they're not going to these things because they necessarily feel like it or that's their number one top priority. Besides the fact that they're contracted to eat healthy, keep a tight lip on things, and of course star in the movies, part of their contract, what they're getting paid so much when you think about how these actors are making so much money, is that they're also kind of being paid extra to go and promote the movie itself. And that's why when we see new releases, we see these actors going out there doing these interviews, starring in these YouTube videos where they do these funny things and they have these funny moments. It's all because at the end of the day, the studio wants to promote the movie the best that they can, and they're using the actors' likenesses to help promote the movie. So that's one really interesting thing that not a lot of people understand or talk about when actors get paid such a high amount of money for their job, but at the same time, it's part of the payment is kind of allocated into an advertising budget, as these actors are going out there and doing marketing using their likeness to best promote a film. It's really interesting when you look at it that way, but also another thing that's heavily implied in the contract is that while they're going to be locked in for a multiple film deal, there's actually a lot of stipulations that they're not supposed to appear in any DC film while their character is signed into the MCU. Now, these rules seem to mostly apply to the bigger named actors. We have seen a few instances of smaller actors going off to join the DCEU, such as Zachary Levi, who went on to star in Shazam, but we do believe that there is some sort of clause in place for a lot of the major characters, such as Chris Hemsworth and others, who have this rule where they're not allowed to jump ship and go to the DCEU while they're also starring alongside the MCU characters. That's really interesting to say the least. There are a lot of other restrictions probably that we don't even have an idea about, but it is interesting to say the least. Obviously, on top of all of the things we talked about, they're probably also signed under a tight-lipped non-disclosure agreement where technically they're not supposed to even talk about the rules and stipulations about being in the MCU, the thing that we're covering right here. And that's why it's taken so long to have a better thought out list of everything that are kind of expected from MCU actors, because at the end of the day, they're not really supposed to even talk about it. So we've had to kind of see a culmination of little snippets here and there through different interviews over the years to put together a image or an idea as to what really is required from these actors. But what do you guys think about this? Which restriction would you have the most trouble with if you were a star in the MCU? Let us know in the comments down below. Be sure to subscribe with notifications on for more videos like this. We'll see you all next time with a brand new video. Bye, guys.
I'm about to.
Hi, everybody.
Hey, everybody. How you doing?
Hi.
See you guys.
Know anybody?